Hello and welcome from Buenos Aires, Argentina to this episode of Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where Nate has conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with the focus on those that have some connection to Latin America. My name is Josefina Dominguez and I am an editor for Latinlist, a proud sponsor of the Crossing Borders podcast. Sign up for our weekly updates on latinlist.com to get a summary of the week's biggest headlines in Latin American tech news. Nate's guest today is Albert Santalo, former founder and CEO of Carecloud and currently founder and CEO of 8base, a low-code development platform that helps founders, particularly non-technical founders, build their digital products in a faster and more economical way. They talk about how low-code platforms are the future of software development and what it was like to start a company right after 9/11 and the dotcom bubble had burst. He also explains how becoming an entrepreneur changed him from a creature of logic to one of faith, and he provides insights on what the workplace will be like after coronavirus. We hope you enjoy this conversation with Albert Santalo.
Hey, Albert, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here and being willing to do it.
Good morning, Nathan. It's my pleasure.
Where are you in the world today?
I'm in my home in Miami, Florida.
Awesome. And so tell me a little bit about 8base. What are you working on?
Yeah, so 8base is a low-code development platform for building digital products. Been doing this for, I guess, now 3 years and having a lot of fun. I think probably one of the best parts of the job is watching entrepreneurs bring their products to life on our platform.
So when you talk about low code, tell me kind of a user story. Who would use this and why is it better for them to use 8base than go and hire a developer out and start to just do it from scratch?
Yeah, well, what I could tell you is low code is definitely the future. There are a number of platforms that are emerging that are going to solve a lot of problems and accelerate, the transformation of the world to being all digital. We can see right now that it's probably never been more important to have digital capabilities, and low-code platforms just, that let people with less technical competency or smaller teams that may not have all of the technical competencies in place get their products or applications to enable their businesses up and running faster. It's estimated that by 2024, about 65% of the software in the world will be written using these low-code platforms.
It's going to be a really interesting transition over the next few years, and we're going to jump into more 8base in a few minutes here. I want to talk a little bit about your background. Where are you from originally, and how did you get into tech?
Yeah, so I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. My parents are both Cuban, which is part of the reason we ended up in Miami. I moved here when I was 11, and I figured out that I wanted to be an entrepreneur when I was about 5 years old. And everything in life after that sort of, I did everything I could to try to become that. I had a few challenges along the way in the sense that, early in my career, or let's say early in my college days, when I started thinking about exactly what I would do, my ambitions were always about building, a larger, more sustainable company. So I didn't really know exactly what that was until I worked in business for a little while. And so, and then on top of that, I got married very young. And I had my first child before I was 19. So that also, had me pump the brakes a little bit before jumping into a risky entrepreneurial situation. So I worked in business and I worked in and around entrepreneurial situations. And then when I was 31, I want to say, was when I finally made the leap to being the entrepreneur in the lead role. And it was a terrifying experience because at the time, I'll tell you more about that, but at the time I had 4 young kids and a wife who's a school teacher. I was the breadwinner. And it was a month after 9/11 and a year after the dot-com bubble burst. So terrifying experience, but got through it.
What were some of the things that you did as a young person that kind of made you know that you wanted to be entrepreneurial? If you knew at age 5, do you have any good stories from growing up of the small businesses or things you did that were entrepreneurial?
I wouldn't say that early on in those days, it was, I was the entrepreneur per se. I was always fascinated with computers. And so I was always from a very young age sort of learning how to use them, learning how to program, but wasn't necessarily standing up businesses around it. I'd say early, in my earlier years, the focus was sports and being with my friends. And then when I wasn't doing that, basically learning about computers. And I took my first computer class in high school. And it was really for me sort of a defining moment. That was, I was in that class, and I realized, that I was really good at it. And this was in 1984, 85. So we're talking about the early days of microcomputing. And at that point, I realized this is probably my calling.
And to talk a little bit about making that jump, you talked about having 4 young kids fight the dotcom crash and 9/11 all at once.
Yeah.
And yet you made the jump from a safe career where you could just continue to earn paychecks to starting your own thing. How did that decision happen, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so I had a lot of encouragement. So if I backtrack a few years, so if I go back to 1997, I joined a group of founders that had started a company called AnswerThink Consulting Group, which was founded by the head of KPMG Consulting with about $20 million of venture capital from inception. And the company, I came in, got founder shares in the venture, and got to see, how do you execute what I would call a fast startup. The company went from 0 to IPO in 11 months after doing 5 acquisitions, listed on the NASDAQ with a market cap of about $440 million. And, while I was there, I was doing management consulting, helping large companies with their IT strategy, IT transformation initiatives. But the other thing I was doing was just watching, how do you do this? And I was just absolutely marveling at how you execute on that. And I was hooked. I was like, well, this is what I want to do. And so I stayed as close as I could to the CEO and, asked him a gazillion questions and just really tried to observe what was going on. And then when the time was right, he was supportive of me branching out and doing this. And later on, he actually became an investor in my second company, and maintained a great relationship up until then. But I had some good examples of just how do you do it, and it was consistent with what I wanted to do, which was build something larger, more scalable, not necessarily a lifestyle company.
It's a really interesting kind of story of how to get into it. And thinking through, there's always kind of this dichotomy between founders that say, oh, I just got started early and I jumped right into it and I learned from building the plane as it was flying, versus people who learned like you did. And did you consciously think about, I'm going to learn how to do a startup working at this job and I'm going to start my own thing? Or was it something where you saw this is an amazing opportunity, this is something I definitely want to do? Talk a little bit about that part of the decision.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that in my case, it was very deliberate, and I was a student of the game. And I would say that in the transition to being the entrepreneur, there was a big shift in who I was. So if you think about the things that I did in preparation to become the entrepreneur, I would study and observe, and I would crawl into S1s. At the time, during the dot-com bubble, there was a lot of companies going public, so you could really study what they were doing. And I felt like I had to be as prepared as possible and leave as little to chance by the time I made the leap. And I would say that up until that point, I was a creature of logic. I was a person that was governed by, I had to sort of see the strategy. I had to see the win at the end and the path to get there before I would embark on something. But what I realized once I headed down this path was that it was way too complex for that to be possible. And I had to transition to becoming more of a creature of faith. And what I mean by that is faith in my ability to figure things out, to change course, to work problems, to have the work ethic to make that possible, to have people around me that could be a part of it and that they would follow and help, solve those problems. And what I found was that if you behave like that, usually unforeseen things will show up that you never imagined that may be better than what you ever had imagined. But 50% of the battle is to just be on the battlefield and just be in the game and have those opportunities come at you. So it was really a very, very big shift for me mentally. And once I did that and I had some success, then the fear just sort of went away.
Yeah, we're seeing similar type stories in Latin America where generally people are a little more conservative than maybe in the US, where
Yeah,
entrepreneurship has been seen as a really good thing for a long time, where in Latin America the people who are working at companies like Mercado Libre, Rappi, Corner Shop, Groupon, all of these, and Mobile in Brazil, all these companies are having employees who are early employees starting new companies, and that's really what builds an ecosystem.
absolutely. Yep. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, it's when you get to see it done and see it get done by people that are world class, you know, there's this pattern matching that happens, and it gives you the confidence and the networks, you know, to also access the people that can help you. To me, seeding an ecosystem, there's nothing more important than that. It's to have, you know, you can talk about how, you know, these ecosystems need educational institutions, they need venture capital, they need all these things. But the biggest thing they need is they need sort of that Google effect. They need to have these companies that have great success and then spawn a bunch of entrepreneurship out of it.
So it's the depths of the first tech bubble bursting. It's post 9/11 and you started your business. What happened next?
Yeah, so this was, so I quit my job. This was a month after 9/11, a year after the dot-com bubble burst. Went without pay, you know, put together a group of co-founders, invested some of my own money, and started doing some things that I had never done before, including raising capital. It was a really interesting time because generally speaking, tech entrepreneurs were like the scourge of the economy back then. You know, it's just, you know, they were thought of as the people who had screwed up the party, basically, especially young tech entrepreneurs, but somehow managed to get through it. My first company, I want to say was, but the company's still around, a healthcare IT venture. And so there was always this defensibility about technology and healthcare that made it possible to talk past sort of the economic downturns. So in 2002, was able to raise a couple of $1 million of angel investment and later on venture capital, put together the team and figured out how to sell to physicians, which was what our business was about. Selling to physicians is notoriously difficult. And in those days, most physicians didn't even have an internet connection. So sometimes we had to help them provision their first DSL line and that type of stuff. But we figured it out and we were able to put together a high growth model, and that company eventually exited. And then in 2009, I founded Carecloud, which is, you know, people know me now for 8base, but before that, they knew me for Carecloud. That was a bigger, sort of more ambitious undertaking in the healthcare technology space as well.
How long did you spend between when you exited the first company to starting Carecloud, and what did you do in the meantime?
Yeah, I took maybe 6 months off, and mostly what I did was ride my bike and think. So you know, it wasn't a huge amount of time, but it was a nice break. It was the first break I had probably since I was 15 years old or so. So but I was very determined to take on the next one. But as you can imagine, the economy, you know, we're talking about, Carecloud was incorporated in January of '09. So around September of 2008, you know what started happening, right? The meltdown happened. So I was in an interesting spot because it was the second time starting a company in an economic downturn.
And after starting the company, what happened with Carecloud?
So incorporated in January, started putting together the initial rounds. Ended up raising a $2.8 million angel round in '09. I later on found out that in '09, there was the entirety of the US raised about $100 million of angel investment that year. So I was blown away by the fact that we raised nearly 3% of that. I don't know if we were the biggest or one of the biggest angel rounds of that year, but you know, certainly something that we're very proud of. And then in the following year, raised another 5 million. Around that time, we launched the product. Now, the product is a very complex multi-tenant SaaS offering, probably one of the most complex that you'll ever see. It's financial, administrative, and clinical software that includes what the doctors use and what the patients use across 50 medical specialties in the entirety of the US, connecting all the labs, the pharmacies, the insurance companies. So, you know, complicated stuff. But nonetheless, we got the product out in 2010. Started commercializing it. All in, about $8 million of angel investment went in those first two rounds. And in that year, we also won the IBM SmartCamp competition in Silicon Valley, which we'd been invited to. That drew some attention from the venture community out there. And then in 2011, we brought in a $20 million Series A led by Norwest and Intel Capital.
And what did you learn from all of that fundraising between your first two companies?
What did I learn from it? A lot. So, first of all, I really liked it. So I liked the fundraising game. For me, it was just a lot of fun. Most entrepreneurs I found don't like it. It also takes a lot of time, or it can take a lot of time. But it's I would say there's stark differences between raising angel capital and venture capital. Choosing your investors is a very, very important thing. And that's always something that is a luxury. Not every entrepreneur has that luxury, but you need to try to put yourself in that position as best you can. With 8base, I tried to do it differently. I've tried to bootstrap it a lot more than I did in these other companies where we raised a lot more capital early on. I think that different ventures, require different capital structures. You can bootstrap some, you can't bootstrap others. But at this point in my life, I wanted to do something where it was more bootstrapped.
So why did you start 8base rather than any other business you could have started? What was the spark that made you decide to do it?
Yeah, so I think 8base is probably the business I was born to start from the beginning. It's not industry specific, so it cuts across all of sort of software, which is really where I think my skill and my passion is, as opposed to any specific industry. But I think that part of entrepreneurship is understanding timing is so incredibly important. So if I had started a company like this in 2001, think about all of the things that have changed technologically since then. And by the way, we have competitors that were started in those days. And it took them many, many years to become successful because they started before there was such a thing as the Amazon cloud or the Google cloud. They started before there was an iPhone or an app store or any of the dominant models that you see today. Before there was an API economy. So when I really saw the advent of modern cloud, I said, well, look, now we can build this layer on top of it, but at least we don't have to build the cloud. And so that's made me believe that, this was much more possible, much more reachable. At the same time, I saw that, software started, like I could see the patterns between different kinds of software. Having worked in so many different industries, having built so many different products, to me, it felt like repetition, but for some reason, developers were always building things from scratch every single time. And so that led me believe there's a very large platform opportunity. And then the trends, if you look at what the analysts say that 65% of all software in the world will be written using these platforms by 2024, where today that's probably single digits or low double digits. They say that most companies will have up to 4 solutions for different types of software, and that the industry is growing from somewhere around 6 billion last year to 52 billion by 2024. So it's in hyper growth. And, my belief is that, this is not a winner takes all, but there's going to be lots and lots of opportunities to build, multiple $100 million startups out of this movement.
What kind of startups or companies most benefit from using 8base?
Great question. So 8base was born to help founders, especially non-technical founders, bring their products to light faster, better, and more economically. Have them maintain more of their ownership, utilize less capital, spend more of their time focusing on building their businesses, not necessarily building their products. And at the end of the day, have what we call a better founder's formula, which is that the day that that founder exits, God willing, they own more of their company and they may even be in control of it. So we're helping lots and lots of entrepreneurs do that now. Sometimes those entrepreneurs are using our platform purely with their own developers, and sometimes they hire our design and development team to help them do it on top of our platform. We love when that happens because we love being involved in those projects. And we do, in my opinion, we do a fantastic job around that. Not only because the platform's awesome and our design and development team is awesome, but it's also because we come with the experience of how do you build a venture backable product? How do you build it right the first time? And how do you make sure that it scales when the time is necessary and does not need to be rewritten? But then we also have more established companies in their digital transformation efforts that build on top of 8base. So if you think about software, there's a lot of the SaaS products that are in existence today, and there's tons of them. It seems like there's a SaaS product for everything, but most of them are to enable employees inside of a company to do X, Y, or Z thing. But as companies digitally transform, they're having to build externally facing, customer facing sort of applications. And so the requirements of those applications are very, very different than the ones that are employee facing. So that is really where 8base shines, is in helping people build customer facing, web scaling type things that require inexpensive user accounts. This is really where we fit the best.
And you're based in Miami. What's it like building a startup out of Florida?
Yeah, so I would say that that's changed a lot. You know, in my first, it was different in my first company than my second company, and now my third company. You know, and I'll go back to Carecloud. At Carecloud, you know, a lot of times when we were hiring talent, we had to, you know, we would wine and dine them in the winter months from places like Boston and New York, and then you know, we'd fly them down here so they could experience what the weather was like, and then we'd bring them on board and have them relocate. Because you know, Miami is not necessarily known as a tech haven. But now what we've done a little bit more of is we've just done, it's more virtual. So we have some key employees that live in other places. And, you know, as you know, and as we're all experiencing, that's now the new normal. I mean, somebody could live down the street from me and we're having to work from our houses. So what's the difference if they're down the street or if they're in another country across the world? So we are, our mission right now is to bring the best talent, irrespective of where they live, to the company.
How do you think that trend of remote work and distributed teams will evolve during and after coronavirus?
I think it's here to stay. I think that what's happening now is that people are realizing that you know, they're having to do a better job on when they're on Zoom. There probably will be some technologies built around teleconferencing and around video delivery and things like this. We're already seeing that as companies are approaching us to discuss how they want to transform in relation to the new reality. But I think it's here to stay. I think that there's not a single, you take the largest companies and there's not a single CFO that's not thinking to themselves, why am I paying all this money for office space right now? We should be investing in how do you better manage, you know, remote workers versus all this fixed cost of office space and so forth. I don't know if that's what you're seeing, but that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, I think it's here to stay, and startups are the leading edge of this. And I think we'll see a lot of bigger companies, at least maybe not, they're probably not going to go fully remote or anything like that, but bigger companies I bet will have, you know, 10 or 20 or 30% of the workforce, something like that, remote. And also probably will have some companies that will allow people to, you know, they'll only be forced to go to the office 2 times a week or 2 times a month even, if they're getting their work done. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that continues to evolve.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, for us, this transition hasn't been hard at all in that sense, right? So like, all right, guys, you know, we're not reporting to the office. We're all working from home. But, you know, I've talked to call centers in larger companies at different points during this pandemic, and their employees are having to show up to the office just to get their work done. And it just goes to show you the level of digital enablement that still exists, even in the largest, most successful companies in the world. Everybody, in general, these companies are still very, very under-enabled.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have any books, blogs, podcasts, or documentaries that you like to recommend to people, whether about startups or just life in general?
Yeah, so you know, startup books that come to mind, I would say the most recent one I've read is Blitz Scaling, which I really like. I like some of the stories in that book about sort of extreme cases of how do you deal with very high growth situations. You know, Exponential Organizations and 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel are two books I like an awful lot. I try to apply that thinking to 8base as best we can, and I'm really optimistic that over time we're going to be able to incorporate a lot of those sort of, you know, growth tactics, strategies directly into a product. So I'd say that's you know, off the top of my head, those are probably the books that I would that I think about. It's been a while since I listened to a podcast, believe it or not. So don't want to comment on that necessarily.
No, that's okay. Podcasts aren't for everyone. Us podcasters understand.
Even though we're doing one right now. No, I really haven't listened to one in a while.
No worries. And you've had a very interesting and successful career in tech, leading back to the 1990s with basically seeing a company go, or helping a company go public, and then raising money and exiting. If you could go all the way back to when you started your first company right after the dotcom bubble burst, knowing everything you know today, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I would say there's two things that really stand out to me. The first one is that make finding the right talent the number one priority, and to really be ruthless in the pursuit of that. You know, these ventures are hard enough, and we as entrepreneurs, I think, come in with some bias. You know, thinking that we have to be superheroes, we got to do it all. And in reality, what we need to do more than anything is find the right people, the people that can do. You know, sometimes they say hire smarter than you, and I don't necessarily think that that's the right terminology. It's more about hire the people that can do their respective function better than you can. And if you do that, then this is really not that hard. And obviously, you've got to be able to afford them. But hiring, you know, sourcing talent, hiring is a lot of hard work. And you know, you can always have the excuse, well, I got to do what I got to do today, and I don't have time for that. But that is really the most important thing you got to do, in my opinion. And then the other thing is that if your gut doesn't feel right, you know, your instincts on any given thing, you really got to learn to trust that. Even when it goes counter to very smart, very successful people that may be on your board, may be very wealthy because they're venture capitalists. But if it just doesn't feel right to you, you've got to dig in and you've got to defend what your opinion is, especially if you're the operator of the business. And what I found along the way is that sometimes I haven't done that, and it's been costly for me.
What's next for 8base over the next year?
So more than anything, I'd say the defining theme for us is sales and marketing. The product is working extremely well. It's being used by thousands of developers around the world. It's being used by large companies, and it's being used by startups in between. And I can't think of a single customer that isn't absolutely happy with what we're doing. So for us, I've recently brought on a head of sales, and we're hiring another salesperson, and we're ramping up in marketing. And it's more about, you know, getting to repeatability in sales, especially B2B. You know, the product on the developer side, developers come and they begin using the product, self-service, no human intervention. Product starts at free. But as we sell into businesses, that's much more of a real sales effort. So we really want to get that flywheel going this year.
Well, I wish you the best of luck and success in doing that over the next year. Thanks for sharing your expertise and your story. Appreciate you taking the time to do the podcast.
Absolutely, Nathan. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Crossing Borders with our guest, Albert Santalo. And thank you to Angel Andraca for producing this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend and give us a rating on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's the best way to share what's going on in Latin America's ecosystem.